Hey, what is going on, guys? In this video today, we're going to be discussing stretched resolution in Fortnite. And more specifically, why so many players are switching to stretched res now, even though it's basically been an option since the game first came out. So over the past week or so, 3 of probably the top 5 or 10 most popular Fortnite players made the switch from native to stretched res. And those 3 players are Ninja, which I think everybody would agree is the most popular and influential Fortnite player on the planet, Tfue, which I think is clearly the second most popular and influential Fortnite player, and then Cypher PK, who probably isn't Ninja and Tfue level, but I'm guessing the vast majority of you guys certainly know who Cypher is. And oh yeah, there's this other really cool guy named like Gronky or something that also recently switched to stretched, so maybe you guys know who that is. And one of the biggest reasons why I want to make this video is because I know that the majority of my subscribers play on either Xbox or PS4. Since it is impossible to stretch your resolution on console, you guys may be a bit unfamiliar with the advantages and general workings of it. Actually, I take that back. It definitely is possible to stretch your resolution on console, but based on what I've heard, it's done in kind of a bootleg way, and the quality of it ends up being pretty terrible. So, if you're someone that's a bit confused why all your favorite streamers and YouTubers are switching to stretched res, then this video is for you. And without further ado, let's get right into it. Alright, so let's start this video off by doing an overview of the advantages and general reasons why someone would stretch their resolution in Fortnite. First off, I want to make it very clear that stretching your res does not make the hitboxes of enemies any bigger than they normally are. I believe I read online somewhere that one of the first games where stretching res was a really popular thing to do was in Counter-Strike. And that was in large part due to the fact that if your enemies were stretched on your screen, their hitbox would literally become bigger. So just imagine how huge of an advantage that would truly be. Luckily though, in Fortnite, this isn't the case. It doesn't matter how much bigger you make enemy players look by stretching your res, their hitbox will still be the exact same as it is normally. However, I have heard some people say that even if the hitboxes aren't actually bigger, it just seems easier to hit the slightly larger stretched character models. I think it's probably more of a placebo effect than anything else, but I guess it does seem easier to hit some of the bigger skins in-game even though all skins have the same hitbox, so who knows. What I'm trying to say is that there are definitely a bunch of advantages of stretched resolution, but bigger hitboxes for enemies is not one of them. In my opinion, the biggest advantage of stretched res in Fortnite is the increased field of view, and specifically the increased vertical field of view. The normal native resolution in Fortnite honestly seems zoomed in pretty far compared to a lot of the video games out there. I've actually seen some people say that after playing Apex Legends for a few days straight, it's a pretty rough transition back to Fortnite because it's zoomed in so far. This has its advantages, especially when it comes to tracking enemies that are very far away, but in close range situations, it can actually be pretty detrimental. I mean, if you're looking straight in front of you, it can be a struggle to see enemies that are across from you if they're even just 1 or 2 levels higher up. And in a game like Fortnite where building and high ground are absolutely crucial, the extra zoom can be really difficult to deal with a lot of the time while playing the game. So I know a slight increase to field of vision may sound like something that really isn't that big of a deal, but trust me, it is. I'd almost compare it to the difference between aim assist on low frames per second compared to high frames per second. You would think something along the lines of, oh, how big of a difference can this really make? And then you try it and you're just totally blown away by how different all of your gunfights feel. It really is hard to properly put into words, but the increased FOV from stretching your res just makes everything feel smoother, and it makes enemies way easier to track, especially in build fights. The other major benefit of stretched resolution in Fortnite is the fact that it actually increases your frames per second and decreases input lag. Those two positive effects are both due to the fact that stretching your resolution lowers the total amount of pixels on your screen. Native resolution in Fortnite is 1920 by 1080, So if you play on some of the common stretched reses such as 1600 by 1080 or 1440 by 1080, that's considerably less total pixels on your screen and it makes the game easier to run. Now what's interesting about this is that it's actually way more of an advantage on PC than it would be on console. And that boils down to one main reason. With PC, there's really no limit on the amount of frames per second that you can get while playing. Pretty much the only thing holding you back is just how good your computer is. So for players that play Fortnite on a cheaper computer, stretched res could be an absolute game changer for them. It obviously comes down to PC specs and how far you're willing to stretch your res, but even just an increase from say 100 frames per second to 120 is a huge difference. Speaking of players that play on cheaper PCs, I've actually heard stories of guys that average something like 50 or 60 FPS and then switch to one of the super stretched reses, and that caused their FPS to almost double. Now that's the most extreme example possible, but even for the players with absolutely insane gaming computers, the extra FPS certainly can't hurt. Going from 350 to 370 may not be as noticeable as going from 100 to 120, but it definitely still helps. With console, on the other hand, due to the current generation of PS4s and Xbox Ones, no matter what model or version you have, you're totally capped at 60 frames per second. It doesn't matter if you have an Xbox One S or PS4 Pro and you stretch your res as much as humanly possible, you still aren't going to be able to override that 60 frame limit. Now the problem with console in terms of FPS is that even though it's capped at 60, it can be a struggle to actually stay at 60. So in theory, stretched resolution would actually be really helpful, especially if you have one of the older models of the PS4 or Xbox One. But sadly, like I mentioned in the intro of this video, stretching res on console is definitely not the same thing as stretching res on PC. I guess you could give it a shot because there are videos on YouTube of how to do it, but I've had a few friends try it in the past and they all ended up going back to normal within a few days. So I know I've made multiple videos on my channel talking about the disadvantages of console compared to PC, and this is just another major one to add to that list. But the question remains, why now? Why are more top players than ever finally making the switch to stretch resolution after playing on native for so long? Well, in my opinion, one of the biggest factors is how the community views stretched resolution now compared to how they viewed it in the past. Even just going back a few months ago, the majority of players used to absolutely hate watching any kind of stretched gameplay. Maybe if you played on something like 1600 by 1080 you could get away with it, but anything more stretched than that and you were in for a lot of hate. However, as more and more players, and specifically pro players, made the switch to stretch due to the advantages that it gives, viewers were kind of forced to become more accustomed to it. If all your favorite pros were playing on stretched, you had two options: either watch it and get used to it, or simply find new people to watch. I believe it was FaZe Sway a few weeks ago who posted a poll to either Twitter or YouTube that asked something along the lines of, do you guys have a problem with watching stretched res gameplay or are you fine with it? And the poll finished with something like 88% of people saying no problem and only 12% of people saying yes, they dislike it. If you were to have asked that same question back around season 4, 5, or maybe even 6, it would have probably finished much closer to 50-50. Plus, with Ninja and Tfue especially making the switch now, it'll only continue to further increase the acceptance of stretched res in the Fortnite community. And speaking of guys like Ninja, Tfue, and Cypher, you can't discount the effect that the World Cup definitely had when they decided to switch. Is going from native to stretched res gonna make guys like Ninja and Tfue significantly better players? Probably not. But when you're one of the best players in the world and you're competing against the best players in the world, even the smallest of advantages could make a huge difference. I'll leave you guys with this recent tweet from Tfue about the subject as a whole. After playing on native res for about a year and a half and then finally making the switch to stretched about a week and a half ago, he tweeted, "I have so much respect for people playing on native resolution." I think that sums everything up pretty nicely there. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you watched the entire thing, be sure to let me know with a comment down in the comment section below. This video is about stretched resolution in Fortnite and why so many top players are making the switch to it. So I want to know, what do you prefer as a viewer, watching stretched res gameplay or native res gameplay? And you can explain why if you want to. Be sure to leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe, turn on post notifications, do whatever the heck you want, and I will catch you guys next time.